into Jets Overtime, presented by SiriusXM. I'm Caroline Hendershot. Quincy Enunwa will hear from Eric Allen momentarily in Baltimore. But Quincy, the Jets fell to the Ravens 23-10 after leading going into halftime today. What is your immediate reaction to the game?
Well, it's kind of crazy that they've lost 10 straight games when they've scored first. That one is really surprising. I mean, that's one of those things where you want to start fast. And this team seems to figure that part out, but then they don't know how to finish strong. And it's continued to show its head over and over again, week by week. They just cannot finish these games and end up putting themselves in the hole. And teams that they should be beating. The last couple of weeks, they could have won both of these games, and they just have small, simple mistakes, from the coaching to the players. It's all across the board. They have to figure out what they can do to kind of win more games.
I think sometimes, too, the score is reflective. It's different than the actual storytelling of the true game.
Yeah,
like this one, 27-10, or 23-10, excuse me, a little different than it actually played out because up until the fourth quarter, it was close. It was a tight game, and it seemed like the Jets were about to tie it up until the fumble with Breece Hall. But let's go to the defensive side of the ball first. We'll get into the offensive side in a minute. The defense, scoreless through the first quarter. What did you like with that kind of momentum that they started out with?
I think they did a really good job of putting pressure on Lamar Jackson. That was one of the most important things. And then they really stopped Derrick Henry for most of the game. He had a couple big plays, but overall, they did a great job of putting pressure on them, closing up the gaps. DBs were filling the holes. It was a lot of great play all across the board in that first half of the defense. You see them all over and over again, getting back to Lamar Jackson, making it hard for him. He couldn't be comfortable in the pocket. And then he wasn't really the rusher that he's been, that we've seen the last couple years. So that was also really helpful.
Yeah, I will say that one note on Derrick Henry. We were talking about him a lot in the pregame show, really emphasizing that you had to take control of him. They only let him get 14 rush yards in the first half. Yeah. And what were they doing so well that was shutting him down so effectively in your mind? Because he only ended the game with 64.
Right. I think it was a great job of playing team football, right? And so they did it like we talked about before. Like they started off really strong, but then the team aspect of it, started to slow down. But in the beginning, man, I saw Jarvis Brownlee in the red zone, multiple back-to-back tackles, getting back there. That's a big back, and he's throwing his body in there. They're playing really feisty, really relentless. It looked really good in that first half.
And then Lamar, you touched on it a little bit as well. He only had 59 passing yards and 7 rushing yards in the first half. So was that a little bit of a product of just him maybe not being fully healthy from that hamstring injury, but also a little bit of the pressure that the defensive front was bringing as well?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of that, but I also think that they kind of got into a rhythm of what the Jets were doing. They figured it out. They found out, where were the holes, and you saw him start to complete passes in the second half to Zay Flowers. He made it a 30-yard pass to another receiver that was about 80 yards. Then another thing that really helped them this game was the penalties. The Jets had a couple penalties that really helped move them across the ball. The biggest one was that 30-yard penalty on Isaiah Oliver that then resulted in a touchdown for the Ravens.
Yeah, and that was one thing I think that Aaron Glenn had been a stickler on. They had cleaned it up a little bit, and then it felt like that maybe this week they took a little bit of a step back in regression. Okay, let's go to the game summary. We'll show you a little bit of how this game unfolded from start to finish so that you guys at home who didn't maybe watch it start to finish can get a little bit of a closer look. So it started scoreless through that first quarter, as we talked about, and it was the second quarter where it was John Mechie getting that first touchdown. They went up 7-0. Ravens get a field goal 7-3, and then it was Derrick Henry. He was all over the third quarter. He went up 10-7. Then they went up 17-7 after another touchdown, and finally they finished off 17-10 after a field goal. But it was the Breece Hall fumble that really did them in. This was it right here. This kind of ended the game, truly, because he fumbled right before the end zone. Ravens ball, that essentially ended it, and the Ravens got one more field goal, 23-10. That was the end of the game. It was unfortunate. I feel like people might come back to that fumble and blame Breece Hall for that, but I don't think that we were talking about it a little bit while watching the show. You said that was one of, the better plays you've seen a defense make.
Yeah, honestly, the last couple fumbles that Breece Hall's had have just been really exceptional defensive plays, right? Guys are going in there. I think the only thing you can really coach for everybody else is to continue to follow the ball, right? The offensive linemen have to follow the ball. The receivers have to follow the ball because you just never know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, Humphries made an amazing play, right? You're backing up, trying to get those extra yards because you're striving and straining. That's what you want from your running back. But unfortunately, even when it's high and tight, if you got a guy with two hands on it, you only have one. That's a recipe for failure.
Especially because on the broadcast, they were saying he specifically studies how the ball carriers carry the ball so that he can specifically punch out or rip it away to each individual player that he is trying to get the ball out of. Okay, we're going to go to Baltimore to hear from EA and his thoughts after the game.
Carolina Quincy, excellent defensive effort from the Jets all afternoon. The Ravens, this is a prolific offensive attack. They were held to 242 yards overall, 4.2 yards per play, and 2 of 11 on third down. The defense continued to give the offense a chance to win this game. Unfortunately for the green and white, not enough points the last 3 weeks if you think about the offense's efforts. 13 points against the Browns, 14 points against the Patriots, and then 10 points today against the Ravens.
Thank you, EA. That was great. Now, Q, from your perspective, what was the turning point of this game? I feel like there might have been a couple cases that could have made sense, but what was the one that stood out in your mind?
I think the biggest one was the pass interference that I talked about. That would be the biggest turning point because I think from there, that's where the route really started. The Ravens were able to score on back-to-back drives after that. This was a huge play because it's 3rd and 15. You get him down here. Even if you sack him right there, it's a big play for you. But then to get a PI, that's probably the worst outcome you could possibly get. You flip the field. You go from one side of the 40 to the other side of the 40. And now the Ravens have an opportunity to score, which they do. They score a touchdown. You get the ball back, which would be another part of that turning point in that the Jets went for on 4th and 2 at their own 30 or 40-yard line, ended up not getting it, and the Ravens scored another touchdown after that. So those series of events created an opportunity for the Ravens to really pull away in this game.
Yeah, that was a little bit of the 1-2 punch there in the third quarter because the Jets, they were up going into halftime, like I said, 7-3, and then it was the Ravens that scored 14 unanswered points in the third quarter, so that really set them back. All right, I just want to note that all Jets fans, if you guys are watching, got to make sure to come out to MetLife Stadium next Sunday because the Jets are hosting back-to-back home games. So this is the first one against the Falcons, November 30th at 1 p.m., presented by New Jersey Lottery. Lock in your seats now at nyjets.com/tickets. That will be the first of 2 home games. Then after that, they'll be back at MetLife hosting the Miami Dolphins. All right, Q, let's head into the film room, see what you have cooked up for us from this matchup and what you want to point out.
Yeah, definitely. So this was a great game for the pass rush. I loved what they got going on. Right here, we see Jawan Briggs with the sack. But the biggest thing about a sack is that when it's a man coverage sack, it's because of what's going on in the back end. And these DBs did a pretty good job overall outside of some penalties to really lock down the Lamar Jackson's guys that he wanted to get to. So we see here, man-to-man, safety does a good job taking away this post-dig route right here. And then we have Sherwood at the top. He's covering his man, but he's doing a good job of just staying in that passing lane so that Lamar can't get it to Zay Flowers right there. And then you can't hold the ball too long because study long, study wrong. Here comes the sack. Then on this one here, it's a good job by just being relentless. That was the biggest takeaway for me. They wanted to be relentless. I think they did a good job of doing that. You see JJ right here, keeping outside leverage, right? Closing that pocket, making sure Lamar Jackson can't get outside because that's where he's really dangerous. Now we see, again, guys all over the place chasing him, making sure that he can't get too far up the field. And this didn't turn into a sack, but it at least was a good play for the defense. This last one, I love this here because this is very similar to kickoff, right? You don't want to get past the ball carrier. So he sees the ball carrier is moving up. He does a good job of, instead of going and taking himself out of the play, puts his foot in the ground, and now he's chasing. And does a good job of stopping this play with Sherwood. It's just a good job of staying relentless, staying in your gaps, staying in your lanes, making sure that you're containing the quarterback. This is a guy that's really dangerous. They did a good job of keeping him in the pocket today.
I liked that. Did you say study long, study wrong?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good
study
one.
Long, study wrong.
I like that one. It feels the opposite of what you would assume, study long, study wrong.
Yeah.
But I like that. Okay, now one question on the pass rush. Do you feel as though that they have been having an upward tick in momentum as of these last few games?
Yeah, I think they are. I think they're kind of figuring out their groove, right? But I think, you just got to continue to marry the pass rush with the coverage, So sometimes they're doing a good job with the pass rush, but then guys might find a way to get open, and that creates opportunities for those big plays that we're seeing sometimes.
Right, and I know you were talking about it also pregame, just about how you want it to be everywhere. Of course, that's like the number one basic, but having that marriage between the two is the most important. All right, now we're going to hear from Bob Wischusen, who caught up after the game with Quincy Williams.
Here with Quincy Williams, and you guys have to feel like you are knocking on the door to winning a lot of these games. Seems like the margin for error is very small. But, boy, it seems like you're a play or two or a moment or two away from getting some of these wins.
Or two. So, the biggest thing with teams like that, when you kind of like matched up on both sides about turnovers, penalties, and getting off the field on third down, and then also sacking the quarterback, just making those plays, really. The biggest thing, just being consistent, coming out in the second half, continue doing what we was doing in the first half, everybody doing their job, not trying to be Superman, just being consistent.
For your defense today, on the positive side, a couple of third down conversions only for the Ravens. You pretty much bottled up their run game. The pass rush seemed to be really disciplined against Lamar Jackson because he didn't have those escape hatches to make those big plays. So the effectiveness of your defense today against the Ravens offense.
Yeah, we knew coming in the game we wanted to keep Aiden in the pocket and let him be a quarterback and get some of those just throws in, not letting him use his feet. And then, man, we got to get out the field on third down, and we can't have costly penalties at those times where we got to get out the field.
And you guys probably are still baffled about not being able to take the ball away, right? Just seems like one of those things that's just not coming to you.
Most definitely. The turnovers, bro, we got to work at it more. I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I really don't know because we put a lot of thought into that, and put a lot of work in there too. Though we just got to get those, man. We got to, because that, like I said, that was the difference maker of a game. Then also those sacks were different makers of a game too.
Well, you guys are playing your tails off as best you can. So thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
That's Quincy Williams, guys. Back to you.
Yeah, Bob was right there. It does feel like they are on the brink of one of those interceptions. They just really can't seem to get it no matter how much things are clicking on defense. Let's go to the Jets offense, though. What did you think of Tyrod Taylor's play today?
I think he was really solid. I think he did a good job of getting the ball out, and I liked to watch his escapability. I think one thing I talked about in the pregame show was that he has to be able to use his legs, make that a threat. He did that today. Multiple times he got out of the pocket and put the ball down the field. Right? You're not always going to have a clean pocket, and he knows that. He did a good job of moving, maneuvering, and getting the ball to his playmakers, man. I was one thing that I really wanted to see was Mechie and Mitchell get out there and make plays. Those were the two main guys that were catching the ball, and they caught them pretty consistently, made some big plays for Tyrod Taylor. That's what you need going forward, right? The other guy that you want to see making big plays, obviously, is Mason Taylor. We got to see a lot of Breece Hall, though, and that's what I'm excited about. I like to watch him make those big plays. We want to see those more in the first half, right? Get him going as soon as possible. This isn't really an offense that lines him up as a solo receiver or outside on the edge, and that's kind of what I talked on the pregame show. But maybe as the season goes on, they can kind of maneuver it because we think about where A-Train come from. He comes from Detroit, and Detroit didn't really have a back that could catch the ball out of the backfield the same way that Breece Hall is. So he has to now figure out how he can continue to change this offense. He had to do it when he had Justin Fields at quarterback, adding in the zone reads. Now you have a threat at running back that can really catch the ball out the backfield. Put him at receiver a couple times, right? The one play that they continue to run, and this is the play that they scored a touchdown on this week, and last week they didn't get the fourth down conversion, was this 2-by-2 set where you have one guy running an in, one guy running an out on one side. It's supposed to be a zone man beater, but you know if it's man, the out route is always going to be open, and it was open the past 2 weeks. You can easily put Breece Hall there, and now you have a big play for him.
He did have more receiving yards than rushing yards today. He had 119 yards from scrimmage. That usage, though, do you just want to see more of him in the receiving game? More. I want
to see more. I think, again, he's your X factor. And let's be honest here. I think he is Coach Glenn's favorite player. Like, when you see on the sideline, if Coach Glenn is consoling a guy or celebrating with a guy, most of the time it's Breece Hall. Like, I don't see the clips of anybody else, right? So we got to find more opportunities to get him the ball because he is the X factor. He is the guy that needs the ball, needs the rock in his hand as much as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, the Jets offense, they have admitted it, that their identity starts with running the football, and Breece Hall is their go-to guy for that. So it all really kind of runs through him. I will say, you mentioned, we saw full screen up there, Tyrod Taylor's one interception. That came way late at the end of the game, just kind of not a Hail Mary truly, but he was really just trying to make something happen. So those are a little bit in the wash of just the end of the game. And then again, you said Mechie and Mitchell. This was the first game that they were playing with Tyrod Taylor, so I was impressed with what they were able to do, that chemistry-wise. But then Breece, that 119 yards from scrimmage, it pushed him over 1,000 scrimmage yards on the year. That's his third straight season of over 1,000 scrimmage yards in a season, and he becomes just one of 5 running backs in team history to do so. So I think we know a little bit why maybe that the favoritism is there and the appreciation for Breece Hall is there, because that is maybe one of the bigger aspects that goes overlooked a bit. Now, I know that we talked about it briefly. That fumble, you don't think that was anything to do with Breece. It was more so just the defense.
I mean, at the end of the day, he does play a part, you know? Like, you have to know that when you're fighting for those extra yards, you've got to be super conscious of the ball in your hands, right? Like, as much as you want to continue to fight, especially when you're facing the defense coming towards you, right? Like, he had his back to the end zone. So now there's going to be a lot of people trying to get hands on the ball. You know, as soon as that happens, it's almost better to get down at times, right? Like, you're already in a position where this offense just cannot take any mistakes. And so it's unfortunate. I think it's a great play by the defense, but it's also something that Breece Hall is going to continue to learn from, just as all the other fumbles have happened this year.
Most definitely. And I also think, too, it was a little bit, too, of just the couple plays before that were chunk runs by him and chunk gains by him that he had to kind of fight through a bunch of different Ravens players to get more yardage out of. So I think maybe he was more so in that mindset of just like fight, get to the end zone, wasn't thinking about all the minutia, of course, because it happened so fast. But, okay, let's go back to Baltimore. We're going to hear from EA one more time.
Thanks, guys. John, did this one feel a lot like last week against the Patriots, where you guys were right in the ball game but unable to get over the hump?
I think it was. I mean, it was a little different. We came out strong. We had a solid first half, and then I think in the second half we had more errors than we probably did in the first. So I think it's like looking at that and seeing where we went wrong, what things we did right, what things we didn't quite execute on. You know.
You get in the end zone for a second consecutive week. Can you take me through that touchdown?
I think it was similar to last week. You know, getting in the fringe or in the red zone, we know they like to bring 0. We knew it was 0. We were in a stack. They tried to in and out us and just, you know, capitalize on the look that they gave us.
You seem really comfortable out there this afternoon against the Ravens. A tough defense, 6 catches for 65 yards, and you get into the end zone for the second consecutive week, and you were operating with a different quarterback. Can you talk about your comfortability?
Yeah, I think it's just time on task, you know. We have new pieces. We have moving pieces. Of course, I've been here a couple of weeks. I think it's just more reps. Like, everything gets better with the more repetition you have, whether it's chemistry, whether it's comfort in the offense and the scheme, like the playbook. So I think that's just time on task.
What do you make of Adonai getting involved as well?
Say that again.
What do you make of AD, Adonai Mitchell, getting involved as well?
I think it's great. We know what he's capable of, and we see it every day in practice. But not just him, the offense as a whole. You know, we have weapons everywhere. We have weapons at tight end. You saw them making plays. Weapons at running back, catching the ball, like on screens and checkdowns and stuff. They were making big plays. So we know we have weapons everywhere on the offense. It's not just here or there. It's just a matter of continuing to play our game and really mold our game.
Did they do anything differently in the second half? Like you mentioned before, you guys came out and you took the lead in the halftime.
Nah, not really. I think they played what we prepared for, what we saw on film is kind of how they came out and played. Of course, when they get up, they start playing a little differently, being a little more conservative. So not really.
6 receptions for this guy and another touchdown for the second consecutive week for him. I remember when he joined the Jets, he was saying that he'd been in similar schemes, so maybe it wouldn't take him as long to kind of adopt. What have you seen from just how quickly he's been able to, 1, get into this new team atmosphere, and then 2, just really jive and mesh well with the offensive scheme?
I mean, he's a smart player. You can kind of tell by the way that he runs his routes and understands the schemes that people are trying to put up against him. So he's running the routes the way they're supposed to be, whether it's man or zone. So it makes sense that once his number is called, he's making big plays for this offense, and that's a great aspect to have. That's a great weapon to have. And hopefully, once Garrett gets back, you see these 3 three guys out there, that's a whole different offense from what we started with in the beginning of the year. We were talking about how this offense had really no receivers outside of Garrett Wilson. I think now you're seeing guys who can really be playmakers and really make plays for this offense. It's unfortunate that it's happening now, but it looks good for the future.
Yes, most definitely. I think the biggest thing that point brings up is just like we don't even know what this wide receiver room will truly look like until Garrett Wilson returns and we see all three of them, including Adonai Mitchell, get even more comfortable in that offensive scheme. All right. Final thoughts from you, Q.
Penalties and turnovers, right? That's the name of the game. That's what kind of and negative plays. So really, the whole concept is negative plays. It continues to rear its ugly head for this team, whether it's a sack at the worst possible time, a penalty at the worst possible time, right? These things continue to show up, and they're all underneath the concept of undisciplined, right? So the guys have to figure out how they can become more disciplined week by week. That's something that they're going to have to take through this season, through the offseason, and into next season. You want to change that identity because then you can really become the team that you hope that you can be.
Hey, and it can all start next week when the Jets host the Falcons at home at MetLife Stadium, 1 p.m. Make sure you're there because then the next week, that is the second consecutive home game against the Miami Dolphins. That's also 1 p.m. December 7th. That game is actually the game where the Jets will be wearing their rivalry jerseys. So that will be an extra little special edition with another AFC East rival. Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us on Jets Overtime presented by SiriusXM. That's all from us. Next time you'll see us is on Pregame Central ahead of the Falcons game. But everyone at home, hope you have a happy and healthy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.